Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another podcast. Today is going to be an epic one. I'll tell you what, when I heard Renee Helmer's story, I was literally just ground struck. So, Renee Helmer is the president of Helmer Ops, which originally was the largest directional drilling company for 25 years in the Gulf of Mexico until some monumental changes happened during COVID, where Renee really had to change the company. But on top of that, Renee started out actually as a teacher, and then she went into oilfield sales as one of the first women in the oil field. And then following that, for 18 years, she was a stay-at-home mom and then came back in the oil field and took over. I just cannot wait to get into your story, Renee, and just share with everybody all the things that you went through and also the hardships that you had during this time.
Thank you, Renee, for being here.
I'm very, very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's get straight into your story so we can find out more about it. As Jamie mentioned, it's all over the place. You've done so much amazing things. So let's get straight into it so the listeners can get a little bit of your story, because I'm sure this is like such a small snapshot of like everything that you've been through and been successful at the end of it. So you're originally from Thibodaux, Louisiana. Your mother was an English teacher and your father worked on pipelines as a welder. Your parents, you mentioned, were a huge inspiration for you and just great role models as you were growing up. And they made you start working at a young age, which, instilled really good work ethic. And like Jamie said, after 18 years of staying home, you went straight back to work. So it's almost like that work ethic never really left you. You did beauty pageants, which you said prepared you for the future. And then you just had such a great, childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, childhood, being raised in Thibodaux, Louisiana on Bayou Lafourche was absolutely great. It was a small town with a big heart and a lot of oil and gas industry as well, because you had to drive down Highway 1 or Highway 308, to get to Grand Isle, Louisiana, on Venice, Louisiana, which they say is the end of the world. We also have right there by Terrebonne Parish where, Houma had a big industry and a port so there was oil and gas trucks up and down. And Dad worked for Transco Continental for 52 years. And at that time you could take children to the workplace. And so dad would during the summertime when he would go and he was building a pipeline in Pennsylvania, Mom and I, because she was a school teacher, we would go on road trips to go visit Dad on his weld site and go see them building these pipelines, which now, are such a topic of conversation for so many reasons. But, rain or shine, those welders were in those ditches welding those pipelines and putting them together. In fact, there's an instrument called a piggy, which is a big heavy ball of different sizes that would go through the pipelines before they would put gas through to clean them out. Well, one of those big heavy rubber balls was in my backyard for a long time, and my brothers used to use it as competition, strongman competition, to see who could throw it the farthest.
How fun. You mentioned that you were in pageants, which I can only imagine being young and, being surrounded by other beautiful, like, girls, and you had to work on your presentation skills and your interview skills. That had to be kind of overwhelming being so young and being thrown into that, but it really prepared you, for later in life. Can you talk about that time?
Yes. So, and you're right, as you got up. So first of all, it just started as fun, being a festival queen. And, I love being the center of attention. I'm just going to go ahead and own that. And so, being the festival queen, but then later on, young, but then later on, as you stepped up, to higher titles and more significant titles, it was like, this is training for something bigger. And, in that industry, it's hard not to compare yourself to the other beautiful, conversational, intelligent ladies all around you. But at the same time, it's so funny because now I see on LinkedIn, people are like, oh, you need a brand. Well, back then we were actually branding ourselves, as to, which subject matter, and which, special agency or entity that we wanted to represent. What was our scorecard? What was our scorecard going to reflect about us individually? Because you know what, we were we were all beautiful. We were all smart. We were all well-spoken. But what set you apart at that point in time?
That's
I love that.
awesome. So, you mentioned that you actually decided to become a nurse, and that's kind of what you did in school, but you realized you were way too social. And I'm sure nursing must be actually a very difficult career path. I can't only imagine just being stuck in a hospital all day, treating people who need help. So you decided to actually become a school teacher. And then, yeah, tell us a little bit about, starting in nursing, deciding that didn't work out for you, going into teaching, but then after teaching, you went to oilfield sales. So run us through that.
So yes, I was at UL Lafayette, Louisiana, in nursing. It still has a wonderful nursing program. And when we got to and I loved the human body and I love science. And when it got to clinicals, though, you were young, you were 19 years old, and that was like a job in school. And I was still in a sorority. I still, was very much a part of student government, and I would have had to give all of that up because I needed to study, I guess, more than some people. And I just wasn't ready to do that. And I was just, it was a pivotal point in my life. And I'm like, I need to make another decision.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, I come from a legacy of teachers. My mom was a teacher for 50 years, and her mother was a teacher back when teachers, she said, I asked her, Matt Pearl, I said, what was your education like? She goes, oh, we took a crash course for 6 weeks at LSU. And when she was a teacher, it was a one-room schoolhouse. They could not be married, much less be pregnant on campus. And if they were in a horse and buggy, they could only be driven by their father, their brother, or a relative.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very, very upstanding, honorable position. And you had to hold true to a very, very high dignity level.
Wow.
Wow.
So you decided to become a teacher and kind of follow in that footsteps.
It was just in my blood. I had been teaching swimming lessons since I was 15 years old and lifeguarding. I taught aerobics. I mean, I was just I was a performer, whether it's teaching science, whether it's teaching water aerobics, whether it was teaching swimming lessons. So yeah, I ended up finishing that degree in 3 semesters, taking 21 hours, because I was used to those study habits, and the subject matter was less demanding, and it was just, again, in my blood. I never regretted the decision to start in nursing because I learned so much. And so when I ended up teaching science, and so learning the human body is a simple machine, right? So I'm teaching, some biology because I'm teaching middle school. I'm teaching some biology, some simple science, simple machines, but also ecosystems, which well prepared me, to transition into the oil and gas industry because I understood the fundamentals of Mother Earth.
So what was really interesting was when we were talking about this, you were very close with a lot of your students' parents. And so when you decided to move industries, you actually had like 7 job offers. And then that's when you decided, like, you know what, I'm going to go work for an oilfield sales company. And then that's when your oilfield sales career started. And what I remember you saying that your father actually told you something about working at a higher standard or something that really resonated with you and that really set you apart from the other people in the industry.
So I'd like to address both points that you just brought up. That was another pivotal moment in my life, probably. So the second biggest pivotal moment in my life, where I had made the decision to leave teaching. It was a very, very sad decision. I was scared. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I told my class, and I told my classroom, I was like, Miss Miller is leaving teaching and I'm looking for a career. I told them that on a Monday. And on the Friday, I had 7 job interviews in 5 different industries because they had gone home
and told their parents.
Wow. And I had no idea that they valued me at that level and thought that highly of me. I really didn't. And it was very empowering. And it was a time when I was like, okay, yes, I can do this. All I knew was the classroom. That was the all world. You go from elementary school to middle school to high school to college to teaching. And it was like, oh my God.
That's all you've ever known. Yeah.
Yes. And so they put me in Houston, sales from New Orleans to Houston, and calling on these big companies. And again, yes, because of the pageantry background, I wasn't scared, and the educational background, I wasn't scared to walk into those offices and say, hey, I have this, let me help you. I'm the best in the market.
What were you selling, or who did you go work for?
Downhole drilling tools. Brent Milam and Ashley Lane took a leap of faith because, yes, I was one of the first female business sales ladies in the industry. And they were like, we want to make a change. We want to make it grow. And in 3 months, I was outselling their sales team. And some other business gentlemen took notice, and they were like, let's do something. I'm like, let's do it. And that's kind of always
That's
been.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's always been. But okay, so what was the second? Oh,
Your father.
But just really quick, just this week, I had a phone call from Mr. Bo McKay, and he said, Miss Helmer, I'm not sure if you remember me, but you taught my brother and sister, and you left Fatima the year right before the year I was going to be in your class. And he goes, and I always wanted to be in your class. I said, well, now we can work together in a different way.
That's I love
awesome.
So sweet. And he goes, let's talk about Fatima. I was like, okay, let's talk about Fatima. And it was just, it was a 35-minute conversation and just reminiscing. And it was so sweet. I loved it. And then dad. So yes. So my daddy, big, strongest man alive. All the contests they had today, I'm sure daddy would have won them all. But with what comes with strength also came a very, very big heart. And he loved to work. He loved to work. And at the end of the day, sit and look at what he had created. And he was very much a Renaissance man, because from welding pipelines together, he became one of the first decorative welding people. And like, I have trellises and barbecue pits and iron gates and bird feeders that surround my yard that were all built by my dad. And it's so special. But with that, we were sitting on the front porch one day, and I was just like, oh yes, Dad, I went to New Orleans, and I was in Texaco's office, and then I went to Chevron's office, and then I was in Houston, and I was in Houston Exploration's office, and many of these different companies, ADTI. And he was like, I have no trouble getting into the door. I was probably bragging at the time. And he was like, Renee. And I was like, and when he says it, with that strong daddy voice, and you're like, yes, sir, Dad, and everything perks up. And he goes, I better not find out you're just becoming a feather in one of them men's hats. I was like, yes, sir, Daddy. Nothing like that's going on. I promise.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think it has a lot to say where, for example, like, you left schooling. We're in the pageant world. You're a pretty lady. I can't only imagine when you were, in your 20s, and like walking into all of these doors, and you're using it to your advantage. And I don't think that should be negative, but you were holding yourself to a higher standard, which shows from, your family, and knowing that your dad has those expectations of you, and you could be a great salesperson with a lot of high standards.
Just to talk to female sales ladies of today, I see a lot going on LinkedIn, and, there's all colors of the rainbow. And, I would love to do a shout out to some of these younger sales girls that says, you know what? Confidence is the sexiest thing you can put on. You don't need to show your bosom to get into the office. Your smile and your intelligence and your sweet voice and your charm, it wins them over, and they ask you to come back and teach them more.
I love that, Renee.
Be a teacher when you
be a teacher. I think that's so important. And you really showed that throughout your career. And, I really want to go back to the point where you were riding high, a successful saleswoman. You started a new business that actually sold to Saber Drill. And then you met your husband, Mr. Helmer, who owned Helmer Directional. He made you, I remember when we were talking, you said you were the Oilfield queen. You went from running sales teams to being a stay-at-home mom who ran all the PTO events, scheduled all the parties, and you even hosted congressional events at your house. And then in 2015, which was 18 years later. So for 18 years, you were this queen riding high. You weren't in the workforce, but you were definitely, doing all the things that PTO moms would do, which is a lot of work for 18 years. And then later, your husband was then diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and his company was on the verge of collapsing. Without hesitation, he came to you and he told you, Renee, I think, things are not going as well, and I don't know what to do. And within 1 week, you were in a car driving to Midland, and now you just started your sales career 18 years later. How did you make that decision so quickly, given the change that happened over that time?
So building a business is the hardest thing I've ever done, but building a family is the greatest thing I've ever done. And your family comes first. And my husband needed me. He and his dad were a legacy in the industry, and they still deserve to be a legacy in the industry. And the Helmer name is going into its third generation. And we're proud of that. We're proud of the service that they provided and the legacy that they carried on. And my husband deserves to continue to enjoy the light of that success. And I'm his team member, and your vows are for better or for worse, for sickness and in health. Mm-hmm. And you don't get to choose what the sickness is, and you don't get to choose what the better is, but you do get to choose on how you look at it. And you can wallow in self-pity. You can look at the negative every day, or every day you can grab your partner's hand and count your blessings.
Yeah.
Because there's always more blessings. That's what you do. That's what you do for each other.
That's amazing. So really, really love that you shared that, because that is so true. So here you are, 18 years later, you have 3 kids already. You've been a, quote unquote, stay-at-home mom, even though you have helped him, throughout the 18 years here and there. But now this business was like on your shoulders, and it was time for you to, put your big girl pants on and get back into the field, get back into the industry, get back into doing what you were doing prior, which is trying to get into people's offices. And tell us a little bit of how that was like. You almost had to return on a part of your brain that was, how do we redo this again? And not only again, but 18 years later, where everything's changed, right? People text now. Sometimes they don't even want to go to people's office. It's all via email. People don't like picking up their phones anymore. It's all about social media, LinkedIn. How was that a shock for you?
Yes. Yes. Very, very, very much so. I was, I was very protected those 18 years as a married woman. And so I reached out to some business owners that I knew here in Lafayette, asking them if they had salesmen. That was my first thought that came to mind, asking them if they had salesmen in Midland that could help me, that could give me some coaching, that could introduce me to people. And the answer was yes. The answer was yes. So yes, I'm driving to Midland by myself, and I'm going to meet 3 salesmen from 3 different companies. I've never spoken to them on the phone. They've only communicated with me via text, which that gave me an anxiety. I'm like, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
To talk to you, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm driving to Midland. I'm like, okay, are they going to show up? Are their plans going to change? It was so many questions. But they did show up. And the first place they took me was to Little Woodrow's in Midland, Texas. And I was like, this is interesting. This is new. I'm used to the Royal.
This is where you make business.
Orleans, but yeah. Okay, we're at Little Woodrow's. And I walked in there and I was such a fish out of water, and literally a fish out of water from South Louisiana to the desert. But they asked me what they were doing, and I started sharing my story. And then, with that, and they embraced it. They were like, okay, what can we do to help? And started getting some motor rentals, started doing some surface work. And then, it ended up, asking a couple of people to help me on commission, and they were willing to help me, and they helped me grow it. But then the next phase was, then that was in November, and then here, then it's in the peak of hunting season, and then fishing season, and I'm like, okay, wait, I feel like I'm losing ground now, because I'm not taking you hunting, I'm not taking you fishing. I'm not doing it. But I can cook. I can cook.
Yeah.
And I'm a good Cajun cook. And I love hosting events and parties. That's what I've been doing. So I started hosting a monthly cookout at my house, sometimes teamed up with some other people from Louisiana, other companies from Louisiana, and sometimes on my own. And that became a huge success. And it brought me to become friends with some of the people there in Midland. And then I was awarded 3 rigs, 3 jobs. I was so excited. I felt so empowered. Richard and I, we're giving thanks and saying, okay, we finally may get over the hump and be able to rescue Helmer Directional. But then COVID hit.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention is just something that's so great about our industry is just how family oriented we are. You can come from really any background, after sitting and being home for 18 years, or coming from a completely different industry, or not even having, you can be anyone, and this industry will welcome you if you are willing to work hard. You are willing to say, like, I'm not going to do hunting and fishing, but you can come over to my house and I'm going to cook and I'm going to throw these cool get-togethers. And it's really like, I just love that story, and that you were awarded 3 rigs, and it's really all about relationships. So no matter, even now with social media and that people are only texting, yes, a lot of things may have changed, but at the end of the day, the core has always been relationships. And if you can win people's trust and they like you and you have a great product and a service, you have a winning chance.
Yes.
Renee, can you tell us really what happened during that time with COVID? Because, your core was getting people together and these events, which of course, when COVID happened, that completely went away. Interaction was at a minimal. And then I know that really had an impact on your business. So how did y'all overcome that?
Okay. So Helmer Ops, that's when I was like, what are we going to, I was like, Richard, what are we going to do? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know. And I said, well, I might know, because in the last 2 years of me running around, some things have been brought to my attention. For example, minority owned companies in the oil and gas industry get some benefits, right? And we have relationships. I've always fallen back on relationships. We have a 56-year-old name. And I said, I'm going to open Helmer Oilfield Products and Services, and it's shortened to Helmer Ops. And I'm just going to network myself as a salesperson. And because while drilling stopped, production's still there. And I know some of those people. I know VP of operations. They're emailing me. I can do something. We can't stop. We just can't stop. And so he said, okay, so we formed the business. It's a little LLC, and it's me. And in networking and in people checking on each other, hey, how's Helmer doing? Hey, how this is doing? Because one of the people that networked with me was Jody Baque, and he has a strategic asset monetizing company. And he said, Renee, are you going to Midland? And I said, well, okay, no, not right now. But I'm not afraid to travel. I'll just use the precautions, and I'm not afraid to travel, and I'll drive. And he goes, because if you go to Midland, you will see all of these service companies' yards stacked with their equipment, and everybody's trying to survive right now. And some people may be wanting to, again, monetize their assets. So I became the bloodhound from New Orleans to New Mexico, driving from I-10 to I-20, literally, with the big hair and the mask, knocking on glass doors for service companies with a big posted sign that said, do not enter.
Yeah.
We're not seeing anybody, and talking to them through the glass, saying, do you see all your equipment back there? The trucking, the yellow iron, the flowback equipment. We can buy it. We have the money to buy it, and we have people that want to sell it, not at auction prices, at true value prices, maybe a little bit lower, but better than auction prices. And so after the first and second level of sales, Jody would come to Midland to meet me. He would close the deal, and that profit kept us going for a little while. And that was the very beginning of Helmer Ops.
Wow.
And then, yeah.
It's amazing that your tenacity to continue to keep going. I think that is just something that's really ingrained in you, and you see it throughout your whole story. And I want to go back to the point that during this time, it's not like everything was hunky-dory, grandy, and great at home as well. You mentioned that you were a helicopter parent and you started working again. Obviously, you're going to Midland, you're driving all the time, and your oldest son started kind of acting out as kids usually do. And I feel like a lot of parents struggle with this. They struggle with what are they going to do with their children when they're young, and then when they get older and they have their own opinions and things start happening, and then you're not there, you're struggling with like, oh my God, how do I discipline and how do I show my child that, I'm still here and I want to support them. But you talked about this and you talked about the struggle, but you ended up actually having your son open up to you. Can you share with us about the third level of parenting that you mentioned when you and I spoke?
So in one of the pearls in journaling and as a parent, the journey as a parent, one of the pearls that I came across was there's 3 levels of parenting. The first level of parenting is you are their protector. I mean, you do hover. You say the stove is hot, don't touch, slap their hand, show them that there's a negative consequences. I remember walking down the sidewalk with John Henry and showing him the stop sign and saying, 1, 2, 3, stop. This is what stop it. We stop and we look both ways before we cut across the street. All those simple levels of things. Then of course it comes to doing your homework and being the best you can be at whatever chore it is. So that's 0 to 10 approximately, depending on the maturity of your child. Then your second level of parenting is called you're their coach. Now you're like, okay, I've taught you these fundamentals, so now my boys played baseball and football and track and wrestling. They were athletes, but I'll use the baseball analogy. You looked at the third strike. So now you're going to run the bases. That's that second level of parenting where you're coaching them. You're not demeaning them. You're saying, okay, but you also giving them praise too when they do it right, right? Which sometimes I wish I would have given them more praise, but at the same time. Then the third level of parenting is called can be called counselor. And that level of parenting kind of starts at 17, 18, 19. And it's the most difficult. It is. A lot of these parents with 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds think that's the most difficult. I would go back there in a heartbeat. This time was the most difficult because I knew I raised them right. I knew I taught them right. I prayed with them. We prayed the rosary. We're a Catholic family, and their decisions were their own. So the trick about being on this third level of parenting and being a counselor is you're their counselor when they ask you to be their counselor. Because if you start throwing information at them and corrections at them and wisdom at them and they're closed, their resentment grows. But as being a Christian family and as being a Christian mom, Richard had been away all those years, and I was the boys' go-to parent and strength at that time. The beauty, the hurt, and scaredness and sadness of me being away from home also allowed me to see the beauty of Richard, their father, being at home. And these 17 and 18 and 19-year-old boys needed their dad. And while I was in struggle mode, we were all in struggle mode. The beauty is the closeness that my boys have built with their dad over the last 3 to 4 years.
That's so special. We actually had someone come on the podcast as well and mention how COVID brought his relationship with his daughter the closest it had ever been. And I think a lot of people listening who, work a lot or who have higher positions because they're either owners or entrepreneurs or C-level executives. I mean, as much as you want to spend a lot of time with your family, you don't have that much time compared to everybody else who doesn't have these big, high expectation roles. And during COVID, it was really it was like the first time people didn't get on a plane for 6 months. It was the first time they didn't have to leave the house, and it built up a lot of relationships, like you mentioned. And I think that was really, it was like a switch. It was your turn to go out and work, and then they can spend some time with their family, with their dad.
Yes.
We wanted to talk. One of the last questions was, you have such an incredible story, from this young girl in Louisiana to trying out nursing, switching her path into teaching, doing teaching, randomly getting a job in the oil field, working in the oil field, then staying home for 18 years, which is a lot of work. I think sometimes people think staying at home is easier, but we've always heard that it's like having 3 full-time jobs. So, stay-at-home moms, they do a lot, and they hold the whole household. Like you mentioned, your husband was out, so you had to take care of everything. And then, with your husband's diagnosis, you having to just step up and drop everything and go rescue this business. And then obviously with the struggles that you went through, and then COVID, how did you manage this? Did you, this seemed like the darkest time in your life, where your husband gets sick, then COVID hits and your business is hurting. How did you get through that? Or do you have any advice for anyone who's going through something similar?
See, guys, I cannot go through life without faith, right? So yes, I'm driving to Midland, screaming at God through the windshield. Yes, I'm doing that. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm sad. Yes, I'm anxious. But, and you probably, that's what builds closeness with God, right? Yes, I'm shaking my fist at him. I'm telling you, we have some things to talk about when I get to heaven.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm telling him that. But at the same time, you close your day. If there's you close your day giving thanks. Because if we live in a world of pain, we will stay in a world of pain. If we live in a world of love, we promote a world of love. So honestly, y'all, it was my faith. But the other thing it was my mother's prayers. Our mothers and grandmothers pray for us every day. And I can't wait to be in that role. But my mother would send me inspirational messages every day. And so would my husband. So family is your support system. And then there are several salespeople that I encountered that I have become friends with, and they become your family too. We kind of say friends and family.
Yeah.
That's a Mark LaCour introduction word to me. And I wish I could be at the Oscars and give a list of the people that kept me going and believed in me when I needed that kick in the butt to continue believing in myself.
I'm so impressed with your story, and the struggle that you went through and how you overcame it, and where you're at today with the business is just absolutely amazing. And we're really happy that you spent the time with us today to just go over, where it's just such a long history of what you have done. And I know within the time we're in the podcast, it's hard to cover it all, but you did a great job, and you're going to really inspire a lot of people